Yeah, welcome everyone for joining us. Do you want to go to the next slide? I wanted to say some prayers, but maybe on this slide. Just remembering the land that we're all in. I think we do have some people not here in the States, but I mean, not here in Alaska. But yeah, it's a special place we have. And then I was just going to ask someone to volunteer to say a prayer. Someone like to say a prayer? I'll take that as a maybe. I can take a prayer. I'll start with a prayer if that's all right. Suffer me, O my God, to draw nigh unto thee, to abide within the precincts of thy court, for remoteness from thee hath well nigh consumed me. Cause me to rest under the shadow of the wings of thy grace, for the flame of my separation from thee hath melted my heart within me. Draw me nearer unto the river that is life indeed, for my soul burneth with thirst in its ceaseless search after thee. My sighs, O my God, proclaim the bitterness of mine anguish, and the tears I shed attest my love for thee. I beseech thee by the praise wherewith thou praisest thyself, and the glory wherewith thou glorifiest thine own essence, to grant that we may be numbered among them that have recognized thee and acknowledged thy sovereignty in thy days. Help us then to quaff, O my God, from the fingers of mercy the living waters of thy loving kindness, that we may utterly forget all else except thee and be occupied only with thyself. Powerful art thou to do what thou willest. No God is there beside thee, the mighty, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Glorified be thy name, O thou who art the King of all kings.
O God, refresh and gladden my spirit. Purify my heart. Illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. Oh God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let troubles harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee. Oh Lord, I dedicate myself to thee. Oh Lord.
Thank you guys. Maybe we can just jump right in. We're going to start with a summary of the contents. Is that slide looking? Oh, there we go. So this is just the basic format, and we're gonna try and go through it pretty quickly, and at the end have some time for accounts or and a Q&A portion at the end if anyone has questions at the end. We're gonna cover some of the overall burial laws, and then those that are applicable to the West. some specific things about transporting the body and the preparation of the body for the burial, coffin, graves, tombstones, and other services, prayer for the dead and funeral services, and then some other related topics that are specific to Alaska and the current climate with COVID-19 at the end. And even talking a little bit about wills and testaments. So we wanted to start with an introductory quote. It says, Baha'u'llah's laws are for the whole world and for the duration of his dispensation. And so this first line, I think, is really helpful for all of Baha'u'llah's laws, not only burial laws, but also thinking about personal conduct laws and other laws like marriage and stuff like that, to really see it in the context of like, this is for his 1,000 years that his dispensation is supposed to take place. And it's not just for one part of the world, it's for the entire world. Goes on to say certain exigencies in specific parts of the world at this time, such as the high cost of coffins or limitation of burial space in some countries, cannot become the determining factors as to what is best for humankind all over the world and for centuries to come. The specific burial problem, sorry, here's my son. All right, get out, guys. The specific burial problems you have mentioned require specific solutions, which should be arrived at through consultation with Baha'i institutions on a case-by-case basis. And so this kind of gets more, oh yeah, we can go on. It's all right. So can I have maybe Phil, do you think you can read this paragraph?
Thank you. Overview. A concise statement of the Baha'i law of burial is given in the synopsis and codification of the laws and ordinances of the Kitab-i-Aqdas as follows. Briefly, the law for the burial of the dead states that it is forbidden to carry the body for more than 1 hour's journey from the place of death. That body should be wrapped in a shroud of silk or cotton, and on its finger should be placed a ring bearing the inscription, I came forth from God and returned unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate. And the coffin should be of crystal, stone, or hard fine wood. A specific prayer for the dead is ordained to be said before interment. It has been explained by Abdu'l-Baha and the Guardian that this law prohibits cremation of the dead. The formal prayer and the ring are meant to be used for those who have attained the age of maturity. From a letter from the House of Justice, 1985.
Yeah, so this gives a concise statement of all the things that need to happen during the Baha'i burial process. And the next slide will go into specifics about what's applicable to the Baha'is of the West. Let's see, Tahir, can you read these two paragraphs?
Burial laws for the West. For the burial of the dead, the only requirements now universally binding are to bury the body in a coffin, not to cremate it, not to carry it more than a distance of 1 hour's journey from the place of death, and to say the prayer for the dead if the deceased is a believer over the age of 15. And this is from a document entitled Laws of the Kitab Aqdas, not yet universally applied. March 2016, approved by the Universal House of Justice. Use of the shroud and burial ring are ordinances not yet applicable in the West, but the family of the deceased may choose to observe them. And this is from a letter dated 7th December 2003, written on behalf of the Universal House of Justice to a National Spiritual Assembly. Oh.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kay, do you think you can read this slide?
Sure. Transporting of the body. It is forbidden to transport the body of the deceased a greater distance than 1 hour's journey from the city. Rather, should it be interred with radiance and serenity in a nearby place. It may be helpful, moreover, to bear in mind that the 1 hour limit for travel may be calculated from the city's limits to the place of burial, and that there is no restriction on the type of transport that can be used. From a letter dated 15 June 2008, written on behalf of the House of Justice to a National Spiritual Assembly. While transportation of the body by air is permissible, due consideration should always be given to the preference expressed by Baha'u'llah for the body to be buried soon and in a nearby place. From a letter dated June 16, 1982.
Clint, can you read this one?
Okay. Transporting of the body. Concerning your query as to whether it would be a sin to disregard Baha'i law by interring the deceased in a family plot that is more than an hour's distance from the place of death, there are vitally important spiritual questions surrounding this issue that must be given due consideration when making such a decision. Spiritual blessings accrue to all concerned when the law of God is obeyed. And in this instance, the soul of the departed is also a factor to take into account. While it may be distressing for family members to be unable to inter the deceased in a family plot, the friends are encouraged to place their trust in God and abide by the law if at all possible, confident that obedience to the laws of Baha'u'llah is a source of divine bestowal. From a letter dated 10 February 2008.
I'll just read this one. Preparation for burial. The spirit has no more connection with the body after it departs, but as the body was once the temple of the spirit, we Baha'is are taught that it must be treated with respect. Shoghi Effendi in the compilation of compilations. Tim, would you like to read through these bullet points regarding the preparation for burial?
Preparation for burial. Body should not be cremated. Body should be buried in a coffin. Graven rings should be worn by both men and women with the inscription, I came forth from God and return unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate. The deceased should be enfolded in 5 sheets of silk or cotton. The preparation for the body for burial is careful washing and placing in a shroud of white cloth, silk preferably, And that particular bullet point is from a letter written on behalf of the guardian to an individual believer, April 2nd, 1955. Shared experiences and insights and burial kits.
Yeah, we do have someone who is going to log on a little later to talk about burial kits, but some communities have actually been proactive in gathering, shrouds of silk and rings that have inscriptions on them and other things needed for burials. And so she'll be on a little later to talk about burial kits that communities can actually gather together in advance. But we also wanted to give an opportunity for some who have like firsthand experience with the burial process. And so we've asked Bahia to share, and Omid also. I think Omid will log on pretty soon. So maybe we'll start with Bahia. Just if you have any insights into the process.
Insights into the process. I've participated in the preparation of one body for burial and another one just in limited ways. So Benny, sorry everybody, can you clarify for me what do you want from me? You want just like what the process was like?
Yeah, I think so far it's just been information about, this is what you do, this is what's needed. But maybe there's things that are missing out on,
on the fluffy parts.
Yeah, was there any significance in the cleaning of the body? Was there any significance in like doing the whole process or getting a ring?
So Rebecca, my sister, would know more about the nuts and bolts, and my dad too, the nuts and bolts of how things were acquired, right? The objects were acquired. But what I can say was that the experience of preparing my mom's remains for burial was probably the most important spiritual experience of my life. I have 4 younger sisters, so it was all of my sisters and a few other close family members and friends who were there. And I think everybody had a different experience with that process. If you ask any of my sisters, you might get a different explanation of what that felt like, but it felt very important to me. It felt like we were paying tribute to, like it was less like about my mom and more about that this physical remain was where all 5 of us grew and came to be in this world, right? And so it was very important for me to have paid respect and to express gratitude to this temple, to this like space where all of her spiritual experience on this planet had occurred. And so it was very precious and very important and very weighty. And for me, just in terms of my own like grief, I think that as we were preparing her remains for burial was when it finally set in that she had passed and that she was not on this earth anymore, that she was not attached to this body anymore, not in a bad, scary, dark way, but in just that she was freed because she had suffered so much in that body. In some ways for her whole life, but especially that last bit with the cancer had been so terrible. It just, for me, it just felt cleansing and it felt important and weighty and it felt respectful and it felt like this last little bit of just loving care that we got to offer her. So it was very important. And I'm always really, you know, I'm a therapist, so I talk to a lot of people about their grief and a lot of people about loss, right? Like it's a major topic. And talk a lot about, you know, we don't have enough, like, we don't have a lot of rituals in the Baha'i faith, but just in like white American culture, we don't have a lot of rituals, right? So like we don't have a lot of rites of passage. We have birthday parties and weddings and funerals and like graduations, and that's pretty much it, right? But when you go through a ritual, and people from cultures other than the one that I grew up in can tell me that there's something that happens to your heart when you're able to do a physical motion to commemorate something that's important. Okay, so there's something about that matters deeply. So to be able to go through some motions and prayerfully, thoughtfully, lovingly just put my mom to rest, put her, you know, her mortal remains to rest, and to be able to say thank you to that body for my physical existence was very important, very, very important, and very healing for parts of me. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of ways that we get so far removed from death and what that means, and that we get so, I don't know, we get so weird about the whole thing. We get so, you know, people die and then we send them off to some place where somebody who never knew them paints their faces and puts them in clothing like they need clothing anymore. You know, like it's weird. It's not, I mean, no offense to anybody that's the process that you decided to do with your loved one. But I think that I've seen a lot of situations in which I really think that being able to lovingly, with your own hands, pay respect and be able to say goodbye in that very tactile way was for me a very important experience, very important and formative and precious, and just as important as the babies that I've seen enter this world. And yeah, so I know it's, you know, my own mom helped to prepare the remains of close friends of hers who passed before she did. And there was a diversity of experiences that she had with that. So it's not always an easy thing, right? There's very little that's easy about that, but, you know, but death isn't easy. It's not supposed to be easy. So I think that the process of the close of a mortal life, it's okay that it's weighty, and it's okay that it's hard, and it's okay that it's intense, because it should be, because that's what love is, right? All of those things, weighty and hard and intense and genuine and sincere. So there you go. That's what I got.
Thank you so much, Bahia. I see, Bud, you had something, and also Karl. Did you guys want to say something before we turn it over to Omid to share a little bit about his personal experience with the Baha'i burial process?
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. There's situations in Alaska, for example, if a child dies in Bethel and is sent to Anchorage for autopsy, and it's mandatory. We had that experience. They wouldn't let us not have her get sent to Anchorage. And NSA made the decision at that time, and this was back in I think the 1980s or late 1970s, that the return to Bethel was allowable because the flight from Anchorage to Bethel didn't exceed an hour normally, depending on the weather, of course. And you know, when you stop and think about it, this could be true with any of the villages in northwestern Alaska. And because many of the villages don't have a hospital where an autopsy could take place, Bethel did have, and it still was required by the state law that the body be sent to Anchorage. So I do think this is an important issue that needs to be brought up and made current in this day and age, especially with so many people moving on to the next life. And we have several Baha'is that are infected right as we speak.
Thank you, Bud. We do have a quote later on that does talk specifically about situations similar to like what we have here in Alaska, but that's later on in the presentation. We'll get to that. Karl, you had something?
Yeah, first I just wanted to just thank Bahia for that beautiful sharing of that experience with all of us. It came across my mind, as I suspect it has other people as well. Who makes the decision about who's going to prepare our body after we pass? And I don't want to put you on the spot, Bahia, but maybe you could answer. Did the goalie say, I want my daughters to do this? Or was that decided by goalie, or was that decided after? Because this is kind of a precursor to what we get to at the end about making our wishes known. That is a potential wish that could be known about that. And then one other thing is that I have observed in our community in Alaska, various degrees of preparedness for death. We don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow, or sometimes it's more predictable. But whatever the case, the simple act of having a burial kit can be a family decision, an individual decision. It could be a community decision. But I have seen people die not unexpectedly, okay? And then people scrambling, one more thing to have to scramble for to pull together a kit. And it just seems like that is not very forward thinking on our part. We should be prepared. And ultimately, I think it's an individual decision, although some communities take on that responsibility. Thank you. Thank you, Bahia.
If I could put my partial therapist hat on for a second, when somebody dies, even if you have warning beforehand, there are parts of your brain that cease to work right, okay? And one of those parts is called your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that does things like, what are the words I'm reading on the page for what laws are, right? And like, where do I find fabric, and what is food, right? So like there are parts of your brain that just shut down, and it's not something you can make a decision about. It's something that your body does when I could like brain science at you for a while, but it's a thing your body just does, right? And it doesn't matter if your mom had cancer for 1.5 years and was horribly ill, and you all knew this was coming. And it doesn't matter if it's someone young that you lose shockingly. And there's no way to prepare, and however much preparation you have, when that moment happens, it lots of things cease to make sense. And so what Karl's saying about having preparation, and as Baha'i communities being prepared and having things and being able to step in those moments, it is invaluable, right? And as a family member who went through this, and this wasn't my home Baha'i community when my mom died up here. But to have people to be able to step in and help us with the mechanics of what was happening, I will die grateful to the Anchorage community for stepping in and being able to help us with that. I don't want to call people out, but Karina Rouhani was able to step in. She had assisted before with preparation of remains for burial, and she was, so she already knew what was going on. And, Karina loved my mom, but she wasn't one of me and my sisters. And so her brain was still working when ours were not. So she could kind of lead us through that process, right? And Alicia Aho was there and was so helpful. And also she and Alice Thagard were both there and sat and said prayers. And so it freed my sisters and I up to like do the mechanics of what was happening, and to be able to have our own emotions and handle our own emotions without having to worry so much that things were not being done right. Okay, so having some people, because it was important to us and we knew important to our mom, that things be done according to Baha'i law as closely as possible, right? And so to have some people in the community who know what those laws are and how that works, and also people in the community who can come and pray so that that process is blessed and goes as smoothly as it can, right? Regardless of how that goes or how that needs to go, is also very important. And for those of us who are trying to just live through the experience, very, very helpful, right? Just to help us stay grounded and help us stay okay in the moment. So really what Karl's saying about being prepared, and us as communities being prepared, and us as institutions knowing what the laws are and having a burial kit on hand, having, some institutional memory of having done this before, can be hugely helpful. In terms of what my mom wanted, I know that those are conversations she had with some family members. She didn't have any conversations specifically with me about her burial. Rebecca and Carmel were here and doing more of the hands-on as her life came to a close because of a lot of other reasons. But yeah, and she and my dad also had some conversations about such things, right? My mom was fairly pragmatic, so she was able to talk about stuff that a lot of times it's hard to talk about. And we were blessed that we had a whole, in some ways it was horrible to have a year and a half that she was so ill, but we also knew this was coming for a while, so it gave us some time to prepare, right? And also just because she was ill and because she died of cancer at home here in Anchorage, there were a lot of other things we didn't have to worry about. And in July too, so she could be immediately laid to rest, and these things could immediately come together. So I also recognize that we were at a great privilege having the resources that we had and being where we are. And so that's also worth mentioning. But I think this topic is very important, and I think it's timely also that, the institutions and that we community members have some of this knowledge, because when someone passes, the family that the people that are immediately close to them are not going to be in a position, regardless of the circumstances, to be super rational about what happens. There are I flew from South Carolina up here to Anchorage for my mom's funeral when she did pass. There are whole swaths of that visit, that few days that I was here, I have absolutely no memory of it all. I don't even remember, right? So I remember the process of burial, but I don't remember flying up here. I don't remember, most of that stuff. My best friend who came with me, when she comes up here, she'll be like, we went here when we were here for Mom's funeral, and we did this and we were here for Mom's funeral. I don't know, because I was in a state. So if we Baha'i communities are able to step in and help, just like the Anchorage Baha'i community did for me and my family, then people who are dealing with the grief are a lot better able to do that and focus on that and survive that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And thank you to Omid for joining us. I know you're part of a study circle, but you're taking a little bit of a break to share a little bit. So I'd like to turn it over to Omid.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm just down the hall from another living Zoom. Yes. I appreciate everything that has been shared, by I think at the very end, there was this, I think, reality that she had with her mom and I think that is maybe another elevation of our experience as a community, that how maybe this can be passed on to the LSA so that there would be a preparation. I remember when my grandma passed away, my mom told me that in Iran, as soon as the Baha'i community heard, they had a group of 5 to 9 people that came and set up the place for memorial service. They arranged for they went and then did a lot of those things that was a very community based, and it just increased the bond of friendship. So those are definitely wonderful consideration, especially in this health crisis that we have. So aloha, Pau friends. I had the honor to have an opportunity to help with the preparation with two of the friends. And I think there is an awe and honor to be asked to help with the preparation of the departed soul's temple, the body. The experience is elevated and enriched much more when you come to know the individual while they are in the world, and knowing that the departed even further enables you to have a so-called goodbye conversation, you know, talking as if you were chatting before, time. I have, in these experiences, what we have done, we began with a round of prayers, and then we started anointing the body. So there were like two of us, and it could have been two or three, but yes, actually in this case was three in one case. And so we anointed the body with rose water. That was part of, the wish of the family. And it showed how much we honor the loved one. It is a sanctified state, right, in which the finality of the flesh is established before our eyes, and yet our love and friendship becomes eternal with the person who has passed on. So in a sense, it just takes you into a different realm, especially having the conviction that the soul moves on, and our obedience to Baha'u'llah regarding handling of the body, and our love for the departed one. It translates how we gift wrap the body with shrouds of silk or cotton, right? And then while we are prayerfully and respectfully are respecting the soul, and are joyfully recalling the loving kindness and memories while preparing, as if you are having a departing conversation with the body. It helped us. We could even we asked the departed one to actually assist us in our life from Apa Kingdom. We adorned the body with a ring, engraved ring, and rose petals that the family wanted on the heart that came from Haifa to even bless further the body. So I have found that the whole process of preparing the temple of the soul was a spiritual one. Our humble posture of awe and honor testifies how we are thankful for the opportunity to be enabled to assist in this process. And it's interesting, as I was evaluating this and preparing for this, was that we are born. When we are born, we are read in our right ear this verse 3 times. It says, "Verily, thou hast come by the command of God. Thou hast appeared to speak of him, and thou hast been created to serve him who is dear, the beloved." Then after the age 15, we say the short obligatory prayer. We all know, I bear witness that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee to the end. And then we marry, we say we will all verily abide by the will of God. And when at the end we say the prayer for the dead, we have a prayer that is engraven on the ring, which says, "I came forth from God and return unto him, detached from all save him, holding fast to his name, the merciful, the compassionate." And I think when and Baha'u'llah tops off this whole process by instructing us that, "O Son of Supreme, I have made death a messenger of joy to thee, wherefore thou dost grieve. I make the light to shed on thee its splendor. Why dost thou veil thyself therefrom?" So going through this, realize that how the spiritual preparation, especially, as being a friend of the family and the deceased, was an incredible aid to allow this process to be dignified and befitting for the loved ones that are around and the loved one who took the connecting flight, from this earth port of the world to Apa Kingdom. That's what I wanted to share with you guys. Appreciate your patience.
Thank you so much, Omid.
My pleasure.
I think we do still have a few more slides left in the presentation. And then at the end, we'll definitely have a time for, questions and general conversations. So, let's see. Keith, would you like to read these quotations?
Yes, I can do that. I saw Kathy had a hand up, maybe.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Kathy, would you like to speak before we move on?
I just wanted to share the bounty that I've had the joy of washing and wrapping 5 bodies now.
Wow.
Well, and actually 2 of them are buried on our land. Know that you can bury 3 people in Alaska. You can bury 3 people on your land without getting a permit. So, and actually Keith won't come up to our place anymore because we've got 2 holes ready to go, and because we know what winter's like here. So anyhow, but what I found with all of those that I've got the joy of participating is that it brings the family so much closer together, and you invite people. Not all families are all Baha'i. And so all those people get invited in and help with that preparation. And the one thing that we've really seen happen is that it brings back family members that have been estranged for years. When you give them this opportunity, it's an amazing, just things happen. There are things in the air that affect people, whether they're Baha'i or not. And so I would encourage everybody to, if they have the opportunity to help in the preparation of a body, to do so. It is one of the things that when you do have to scramble to find all that stuff, you will prepare for the next time. So, and so we do have burial kits. We have a lot of burial kits, but anyhow, and I'll be happy to share that at the end too. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that same point, I was going to bring up an earlier quotation. It kind of, Omid's was talking about it earlier, but this quote, which I think is really important, one of the most important of the whole presentation, it says, "Spiritual blessings accrue to all concerned when the law of God is obeyed." And so I think it's a good reminder that it's not only for, the person whose body's being prepared, but the people who are preparing it, and the family of the people who are of the person who is deceased as well. Thank you again. Keith, can you read these next few quotes on this slide?
Prayer for the dead and funeral services. The prayer for the dead should be read in its entirety by one person, while all others stand in silence. It is not the practice for those present to repeat any part of the prayer in unison. And that's from a letter dated 16th of June, 1987, written on behalf of the Universal House of Justice to an individual believer. As to the timing of the recital of the prayer of the dead, it should precede interment. This letter from dated 19th of December 2019, also on behalf of the Universal House of Justice to an individual believer. Regarding the Baha'i funeral service, it is extremely simple as it consists only of a congregational prayer to be read before burial. The utmost simplicity and flexibility should be observed, and a selection from the Baha'i sacred writings would serve the purposes at the present time, provided this selection is not rigidly and uniformly adopted on all such occasions. It's from Shoghi Effendi, the compilation of compilations, volume 1, page 9.
Let's see. Phyllis, would you like to read this slide?
Coffin, graves, tombstones, and other services. Coffins should be made of either crystal, hard, resistant stone, wood that is both fine and durable. The dead should be buried with their faces turned toward the Qibli. That is, the position of the body in the grave should be with the feet toward Baji in Akka. It would be improper to have the greatest name on the tombstone. One could have a 9-pointed star, or a Baha'i quote, or the word Baha'i on their tombstone. And then shared experiences or insights.
Yeah, I just wanted to open it up if anyone had any specific, insights or recommendations on the practice of, coffins or saying the prayer for the dead.
Yeah, Benny, this is Pat. The only thing I'd like to say, and I don't know, maybe I missed it at the beginning, is that you need to have the mortuary, the mortician to understand that if you don't want to be embalmed. I've had the privilege of doing 3 services to the ones that passed on, and 2 of those they didn't have to be embalmed, but one they went ahead and embalmed them before they realized that we would like to have had them buried without. So it's really important, and the morticians do change. They don't always stay the same. So I don't know if that's the LSA's responsibility or whose, but it's really important.
Thank you.
I could share that there are 2 cemetery plots in Wrangell, and in one of them, it's rather old-fashioned, and all of those graves face Baji or the east. And in the cemetery that Chuck is buried in, most of those graves face the other way. But we had learned about this and knew about it, and especially since he had worked on the stained glass windows in the Shrine of the Bab doing repair work, we followed that law. So his little feet faced the other way, and all the other graves, most of the other graves in that cemetery face the other way. It's just symbolic, perhaps, but like the first writing said, there are mysteries that we just don't know about. And so just following that one law has a lot of meaning for us. Grateful for it.
Thank you. Tim?
So, my family and I participated in the this process with my dad, who died in Fairbanks, and which is less than an hour's journey from Nenana. And so, I have attended funerals and potlatches here in Nenana for a long, long time, but this was my first time to really experience this process here as part of the bereaved family. And some of the things that Bahia said earlier, I think the Western society, the dominant culture, really does almost all it can to be detached from the whole process of preparing our loved ones for burial and of burying them. And here in at least in Nenana, and I think pretty commonly in villages around Alaska and probably in other areas, and in other cultures that exist in the United States, it's much more of a hands-on process. And one of the things with Dad is actually, even before he passed away, a very dear Baha'i friend who had made coffins before called and asked if we would give him the honor of making the casket. So Dad is buried in a casket made by a very dear friend. And then we had, and of course the community just, I mean, as soon as people here in Nenana heard, they immediately started bringing food to Mom's house, because that's the tradition. When somebody dies, then you start having tea and meals at your house, and you start preparing food for the grave diggers, who are basically volunteers. And the chief of Nenana drove my sister Nikki and I up to the cemetery on the hill across from the Tanana River from Nenana, which in the old days was called the Native Cemetery, but now basically the tribal council gives permission for anybody to be buried there if they wish. And Mom and Dad had actually officially requested permission to be buried there before they had died. And the chief took us up there and he pointed way down this snow-covered hill and said, that would be a good spot for your dad. And, you know, so, and so when you do this process here, where you're really, you know, intimately involved in providing the firewood so they can heat the ground, so the grave diggers can dig the grave. And one of the women here who is very, that's one of her services, is she helps families line the coffins. Actually, the person who helped us line my dad's coffin later passed away. Was so you're very, very hands-on, and as Bahia said, that really helps with the process. And you know, we didn't get everything right. I see but you know, we did what we could in the spirit of obedience. And it really does, you know, the grandchildren, a couple of the grandkids helped with the transfer of Dad's body into the coffin and secured the coffin. And this is a process. And I'm sure that if you ask any of them, they will say that was a very meaningful process. So obedience really does bring blessings, and the community is so important. And in our case, a lot of the assistance we got was not from the Baha'i community, because our Baha'i community is very small, although the Baha'i community was very supportive. But I know that, you know, the first slide we had about honoring the land and its peoples, and I can say that my family definitely was the recipient of many blessings from the Athabascan people here in Nenana. And actually at Dad's funeral potluck, the Native Council, one of the Native Council participants, members, announced that the Native Council had voted to adopt Mom and Dad into the tribe. And that was announced at Dad's funeral. So there's, anyway, so many blessings.
Thank you. Tahari?
I would like to share my experiences from the Middle East, Kuwait. You know, that is an Islamic country. And initially, the rules were so strict that we were not even allowed to say Allah on the telephone. Like, it was a very hush-hush thing, because we could not have meetings. Our conventions, etc., were very small. Summer schools were small, so that, you know, we would not attract attention from outside. But it's a Baha'i community. People are born there, people die there. And so in Kuwait, the government has 3 kinds of burial spots, one for the Shias, one for the Sunnis, and one for the expats, the foreigners who work in Kuwait and who die. It's a very huge plot of land, and anyone who is not a Muslim is buried there. So when this plot was allotted, the Baha'is took one corner and paid the caretakers, there are caretakers looking there, and said that unless we, because majority of us over there were Iranians, it says, unless we don't come, don't allow anyone else to be buried in this spot, because it was a very huge, huge, huge square spot. So on the far, far side were expats. On one corner, we Baha'is took over. Initially, there was no place to wash or anything. So we would bring the body to the Baha'i Center, and we would take it in the kitchen, on the kitchen table, or we'd drag a dining room table, and we'd wash the body there. After many years, then friends started objecting. They said, this is not, prestigious, how we are doing this. Some would wash at home, and that is also not practical because, you have a bathtub. Some houses didn't have bathtubs. So how do you do it? Then finally, one of the Baha'is went and spoke to the government and said that, see, you all know that there is a Baha'i community in Kuwait and people die here, and we need to wash our dead in a nice way. So then they allowed us to have like a washroom. So that news was so fascinating for the Middle East that a letter was sent to the Universal House of Justice immediately to let them know that, especially for the Baha'is, they allowed us to build. So it was just like a little room, and they had a platform which was a little like this, so the water would flow down. And there was a cupboard with things like cotton and cloth and everything inside. And my first experience of washing a body was a member from my own community. When I got married and went there in '69, they were my first friends. So over the years, after many, many years, when she grew older and she passed away, I told her daughter that, will you give me the honor of helping you wash mom? And she said, yes. And then there was another Baha'i lady who always volunteered. If there was no one around, she would always volunteer. So she said that, yes, there is Furuh Khanum and you and me. I don't want a big crowd. We said, no, it's just us. I called Furuh. She said, you just get an apron for yourself and gloves, that's all. She told my friend, get shampoo and soap and lots of towels. So we were prepared. And as we went, and the thing in Kuwait is, as our friend was mentioning, that the Baha'i friends, as soon as they hear someone has passed away, someone has delivered, someone is getting married, the whole community, just comes together. And so the friends were all there at the burial site while we went in that little room. And Furuh said, first we say a prayer. And that really calmed my friend because it was her mom, while me and Furuh were outsiders. So we were very conscious of, that it is a very sensitive issue for her, seeing her mother being washed. So we were very calm, we said a prayer, and then we washed her, and our conversation was very soft-spoken and very natural, just talking about the things what mom did and how we served here, how we served there, and her life was so good and all that. And the last wash, we sprinkled rose water all over her. Then we used the 5 pieces of the shroud, and the coffin was ready. We placed her in that, and then we called the family members if they want to see the face for the last time, and then we covered it, and then we took. After many years, the crowd was getting larger because non-Baha'i friends and relatives would also join. And so the prayers could not be heard. So we had a loudspeaker kept there. And I'll relate one incident. There was a young man who was attending a Christian funeral on the far end, which was not our end, but it's the same cemetery. And we were in our property. So when the prayer for the dead was being chanted, this Arab was listening. And he said, wow, what are these beautiful words? I never heard these words before. And he turned and saw there was a group of people in this corner. So at that time, he said, it's very sensitive. The next day he came and he looked at all the graves that were there. Some of them had hidden words printed on the tombstone. When he read that, it touched his heart so much that he started to cry. And this is a Kuwaiti man. The caretaker, they're always taking rounds. He asked the caretaker, who is buried in this corner? One there in the other corner. He said, those are mostly for Christians and all. This side, he said, I don't know who they are, but they're a bunch of Iranians. But they're totally different from the other Iranians. And they bury here. He said, but why is everyone facing in a different direction? Because he, as an Arab, knew that the Muslims are buried in another direction. So the caretaker said, I really don't know. Why don't you ask them? So he said, no, the next time somebody comes here, get me their number, then I will call them. And this is my number. So, when someone is buried for a couple of days, we keep visiting the same place, we visit their tomb. And so the caretaker said that, can I have your telephone? There's somebody who would like to know something more about your burial. And he said, sure. And then this Kuwaiti man, his name was Ali, he calls one of the Baha'is and says that, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I heard you all pray. It really touched my heart. I read the writings on the tombstone, and I have never read that in the Quran, in the Bible, anywhere else. From where are these writings? And they said, oh, they are the hidden words of Baha'u'llah. And he said, who is Baha'u'llah? He said, well, I can't talk to you on the phone, but if you'd like to visit me, just let's meet and talk face to face. And he said, sure, I want to know. He said, because these hidden words does not let me sleep. It keeps repeating in my head. And then he spoke to the Baha'i gentleman. And then because this man was a Kuwaiti, he said, do you all have Kuwaiti Baha'is also? They said, yes, there are 3 families in Kuwait who are Kuwaiti Baha'is. He said, I would like to meet them. And he met, and he was at that time our auxiliary board member. And they taught him the faith. And he started reading and reading and reading. And he said, this is beautiful. And then our Baha'i friend, the auxiliary board member, asked him, so what do you believe in? He said, I was a Muslim. I was born into a Muslim family, but now I am a Christian. And I said, oh, so you went backwards. He said, what do you mean? He said, you went one step back. You were a Muslim and you accepted Jesus Christ. You should go forward. He said, what do you mean? So then he explained, the progressive revelation. And he was so amused. Happy to say that he became a Baha'i, and he is still a very, very staunch Baha'i. And then he said, can I meet the other families, Kuwaiti families? So they took him to an elderly Baha'i. And that Baha'i, he was raised in Kuwait for a very, very long time. So he knew the older Baha'is. So when this old Baha'i asked him, what is your family name? Because, in Kuwait, the tradition is you say your name, then your father's name, then your grandfather's name, then your great-grandfather's name. So it's all one long title. So when he heard, he said, are you the grandson of so-and-so? He said, yeah. He said, did you know your grandfather was a Baha'i? He said, no way. I never heard it in my family. I don't know anything. It's not true. So he said, go and ask anyone in your family. Ask your mom, ask your dad. He said, my dad has passed away. He said, ask your mom then. So he comes very excited at home and asks his mom, what religion was dad? And he says, oh, towards the end of his life, he became crazy. He said, in what way? He said, we prayed the namaz this way. Your father would go and pray that way. We fast in Ramadan. Your father would not fast in Ramadan. He would fast some other time. He had become totally, off. And he would close the door and pray. And he stopped going to the mosque, which was very bad because it showed on our family that, the father of the house not coming to the mosque. And Fridays was the day of prayer where everyone saw everyone. So she said it was very disappointing. So then he realizes, he says, by any chance, was he a Baha'i? Did he call himself a Baha'i? He said something like that. He went totally out of our community. The grandson was so happy. He said, my grandfather saved my life. And then later on, his younger brother also became a Baha'i, and they're still Baha'is. And this is the power of prayer. This is the power of the hidden words. And that's all. This is one of the good experiences we had in Kuwait. Thank you.
Thank you, Tahare.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to, because we were going to take a break. I wanted to stop it and then come back to it right after the break, kind of like a cliffhanger, and then a commercial break, and then come back. But it's all right. Thank you so much for sharing. We did have a scheduled 5-minute break right now, just to get up, everyone stretch out. It's, we're almost done with the presentation, but it's good to stretch still. So Karl's going to start a 5-minute timer, and then we'll be back.
We encourage you to get up out of that seat. You've been there for over an hour. It's not healthy. Enjoy a little music while you are on your break. Here we go. Welcome back, friends. Cover your ears.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We just had a slide here. How might COVID-19 impact preparation for burial? It's considered on a case-by-case basis. Civil law and public health considerations. Look to the local spiritual assembly or national spiritual assembly for assistance if needed. This is still kind of something new. I think it'll tie in with the next slide. If we can talk about the next slide as well. Let's see. Candy, can you read this paragraph?
Yes,
Thank you.
I just need to make it a little larger on my screen. When a Baha'i passes away in the situation you have described, fellow believers should, in the first instance, endeavor to find a way to observe the burial laws of the faith. For example, they could investigate whether there may be any cemeteries that can be reached within 1 hour from the civil limits of the city in which the believer passed away, by whatever form of conveyance chosen, that do offer winter burials, or which may be willing to make special provisions to accommodate a winter burial. However, if no such solution is feasible, the believers will have to do their best to keep the journey as short as possible. Also, there is no prohibition in burial law against the use of vaults above the level of the ground, which suggests another solution that is consistent with the laws of the faith. The Friends should turn to their National Spiritual Assembly if there are questions that cannot be resolved by reference to the points shared in this letter, providing it with the full particulars. This would include questions pertaining to embalmment. Depending upon the facts, the Assembly may offer guidance about how to resolve the matter. However, it is recognized that there could be unusual or novel circumstances that are not easily resolved. In that case, the National Assembly would naturally turn to the House of Justice for assistance in identifying an acceptable solution. And this is from a letter dated 19 December 2019, written on behalf of the Universal House of Justice to an individual believer. And then writing of a will and testament.
Sorry, that last bullet, that's the next topic that we'll go to, but this paragraph kind of talks to what Bud was talking about earlier with, rural Alaska. Also, just the challenges of burying in the winter time that Tim actually talked about a process about burying in the winter time. Yeah. Also, I think COVID-19 kind of falls under this. Sorry, Gloria, were you going to say something? I think you're still muted.
I'm sorry. We have to abide by the laws, but there are some cities that have crypts above ground that they will rest the body in until the spring when the ground can be prepared. That I've come into that. I've had to cross that bridge here in Alaska.
Yeah, and I think this this paragraph kind of illustrates that we do have a standard, but of course, there's certain circumstances where different solutions might be acceptable in certain cases. Is it all right to move on to our next topic? Oh, yes, Karl.
I could just share just a little bit of information that's fairly recent. We had, to our knowledge, a first Baha'i in Alaska who passed, and it was connected to having a COVID infection. And so what I learned was that the funeral director was familiar with Bahá'í Burial Law, but also had to remedy and recognize the standards by which dealing with a person who had COVID. And so they, the family was told that the body could not be wrapped, according to Baha'i law, unless the body had been embalmed. And because of the prohibition against embalming, the family chose not to embalm, and therefore they were not able to wrap with the silk or the cotton, and instead the body was dressed and the burial took place with all the other parameters of Baha'i law being followed. So that's the most recent thing that we know. We've had that experience here in Alaska. And so like Benny said, the precedence is following the law and the circumstances are a little bit different. Just another connected thing is, I don't know if anybody saw the Friday's Anchorage Daily News had on the front page, there was a story of a Native woman from Akiak. Her name is Lucy Ivan, and she also had COVID. And it was kind of interesting. I encourage you to go and read the article. There's some really sad but also beautiful things within this article about what happens when people die and how the community and the family comes together. But in the end, the family prepared the body and buried her. They hauled her off and put her in the casket. The Yukon Kuskokwim Health Corporation had sent some materials to be able to deal with this body that had been infected with COVID. In the end, the family it was more similar to a Baha'i burial than to what would have been done traditionally. And so it was kind of an interesting thing to think that COVID maybe had some silver linings around how the family ended up dealing with this particular body as a result of the pandemic going on. I'm down.
Thank you. Yes, Keith.
Several years ago when Walt Kaiser died here in Fairbanks, at that time it was our understanding that if you were not embalmed, you needed to be buried by state law within 24 hours. And it was fortunate that Brad Forrester was working for the city here in Fairbanks, and we were able to clear the way to where Brad could dig the grave in the frozen ground, and Walt was buried within that period of time. I have we had another experience in the 80s. Velma and I were given guardianship of one of her nephews, and he committed suicide in the village of Beaver when we had stopped there for a short period of time. I wasn't in the village, but he was. But because we were his guardians and he had declared himself as a Baha'i, we had a lot of opposition from the family. But we had insisted that he be buried within that 1 hour travel. And for quite a few years, there was animosity there. But in recent years, I think that's melted away. But yeah, I can see a lot of problems when you have families that are Baha'i and not Baha'i. But that was my comment.
And that's actually a really good segue into our next portion about about writing a testament and will. There is this new document that was released by the National Spiritual Assembly. So if you would like that, just contact the Alaska Baha'i National Center. They can get that to you if you don't have it. But we did want to just cover just one slide, I think, worth of wills and testaments. Let's see, Darla, would you like to read this this slide?
Sure. Writing of a will and testament. It should be noted that the question of the will is of extreme importance. Everyone should devote the most serious attention to drawing up a will, so that there should be no one who doth not have a will. This is one of the binding laws of this mighty dispensation. Abdul Baha, from Tablet of Abdul Baha, cited in Wills and intestacy under Baha'i law, selected extracts from the Baha'i writings and communications by and on behalf of the Universal House of Justice, Baha'i World Center, December 2019.
Thank you. And I think we were going to do a poll. Is that right? Is it set up, Karl, to do the poll? Sorry, you're mute. Oh, excellent. So we can, we're just going to do this poll. It is confidential, but we were wondering if, just so we can see what the breakdown is. And then after this, we're going to have Lee share a little bit about the process she went through writing a will and testament. So yeah,
a little bit more about this. A little bit more about this poll. As Benny said, it is anonymous. Nobody knows who's answering what. And also, you can answer as many of these that apply. It's not just answering one of them. So you do not yet have a written will. I'm thinking about getting this task completed. I have a written will, but I'm not certain it meets all of the spiritual and legal standards. I have a written will that I am confident meets all of those spiritual, legal and spiritual standards. And then finally, I'd be interested in attending another workshop on this topic specifically, just wills and testaments.
I can do it.
Okay. We're just finishing up the.
Also, maybe on that note, that this kind of workshop that we're doing isn't meant to be like the one be all end all. We're hoping that, you know, every few years that this topic of Baha'i burials, like another workshop can happen. Just keep it at the forefront. Maybe not at the forefront, but keep it, you know, relevant throughout so that we don't go another, you know, 20 years without having a workshop like this.
So I see that 20 of the 25 connections have cast a ballot. That's 80% of you have voted. Okay, so I'm going to actually close it in just a moment, but now 21 out of 25, we're up to 84%. And I'll show you the results. You're gonna see where everybody is on this, collectively anyway. 4 people who have not yet voted, you get another few seconds to do so.
But did you have a question about the poll?
Not about the will, but about the embalming. It hasn't been mentioned except in that last thing that was on the Zoom that just mentioned that it was something that needed to be discussed.
Let me go ahead and end this poll, Benny, and show everybody the results. Thank you for participating. Here are what the results look like. So about 24% of you have said you do not yet have a written will. 29%, a few more, said, I'm thinking about getting this task completed. Another 29%, I have a written will, but I'm not sure it meets all the spiritual and legal standards. 38% report do having one that I'm confident does meet those standards. And then the largest turnout was 57%. More than half of us said we'd be interested in doing a workshop simply on wills and testaments. So again, thank you for sharing. I'm gonna go ahead and grab Lee. She's working right now. She's working as a contact tracer, but she's gonna step out to share a little bit of information here. Okay, let's go ahead and stop sharing and you'll see.
Yeah, and also to Bud's, just really quickly, I think the writings state that it's embalmment isn't something that Baha'i should do. I think I saw somebody waving their hand. Can you wave it again? Oh, Keith.
Yeah, come to mind when Karl was talking, you know, like here in Fairbanks, we have 2 undertakers, I think, or 2 funeral homes. So I can see where maybe our assembly should make sure that they understand Bahá'í burial laws. And I mean, every community should be able to do this if you have undertakers.
Muted.
good.
Thank you. And Lee, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. This is a little abrupt transition for me. Sorry I couldn't join you for the entire time, but I was asked to maybe provide a little personal perspective on our experience with wills. And so I just had a couple reflections based on our experience. One of the first things I thought I would share is just what a peace of mind it offers. The first time we did a will was when we were new parents. And so it was an interesting process. We've done it, updated our will a couple of times. And each time there's just an experience of just a peace of mind that comes with it, both out of having our affairs in order, as well as knowing that we've complied with Baha'i law and have that obedience, a sense of obedience and the real joy that comes from being obedient to Baha'u'llah. And then I thought maybe just to share almost bullet points of some of the conversations or considerations that we had as part of creating our will. One had to do with the burial requests that I think has been covered in other aspects of this workshop. And maybe the only thing that we came to realize is how important it is to have those probably separate physically from the will itself, because oftentimes we can't expect that our burial requests or that our will is going to be opened or read. So just considering who you want to communicate that with and make sure that anything having to do with your burial is communicated separately. And then, of course, there's the question about children and who will be taking care of them. That's often a part of the will, and to have that updated. And there's lots of considerations that goes along with that. And I think everybody's circumstance is different, but this is a real exercise in unity and diversity. I think kind of the process of thinking about things. Some of the considerations are the same regardless of the actual circumstances in people's lives. It was the first time we did a will, we were not aware of Baha'i law and huququllah and things like that. So it wasn't included the first time we did that. But the second time we had, or the second or third, and the second and third time, we had the bounty of the resources, and I am really appreciative of the new resources, both human resources in terms of our huququllah representatives, as well as some new materials, including a very thick, heavy book called The Right of God, which we had a lot of value in really poring over that. It was good preparation, both mentally, spiritually, as well as kind of technically to learn that. And we found that we did use a lawyer to draw up the final will documents. And when it came to huququllah, the person that we used was not familiar with this at all. And so a person doing their will might be prepared. If you're using other legal resources outside of the Baha'i community, you'll be in a position to educate them a little bit. They won't necessarily be able to tell you kind of how to structure that. And there's different ways of doing that. I won't go into it, into what those ways are, but just again, to know that there's some different ways that the law of huququllah can be accommodated. And the one thing I thought I would mention is that it came to our attention at that point how valuable it is to have a huququllah accounting system already in place in the household, because that'll make it easier when doing that accounting or having the executor or personal representative do that. And then, of course, the beneficiaries are a big part of a will, being able to determine which individuals as well as organizations, whether Baha'i or not, that will be receiving anything of any portion of the estate. And then I guess the final thing is the consideration had to do with choosing an executor or a personal representative, as it's called. And the different things that went into that. I think especially for us, it became really clear to us that a lot of people look to their family members to be that personal representative, like who's closest to them or who in their family is good at accounting or things like that. And yet we, again, thought that because of some of the contributions, and especially Hagugula, and especially maintaining family unity, somebody, having a Baha'i as a personal representative had some real advantages. And that's not to dismiss, the real value that can come from our own family members too. But those were just some things that came to our attention in our process. Yeah, and in terms of the process, having conversations with our intimates and other helpful resources, using the resources and the templates that are out there, I think is a wonderful idea. Consulting with an attorney is optional, and I don't know if you've mentioned, it probably costs anywhere from $200 to $2,000 is our best guess. But there are other ways of doing it, but there's some benefits of using that. And then thinking of filing, I guess the last thing I would say is, because I'm such a detail person, right? You can do all of this wonderful stuff and have this great document, but if nobody knows where it is, then, that's problematic. So there's some ways everybody in our family has an abbreviated version of what is available should we die, where they should look for information and stuff. But then they also know about the red book, the red binder that is located in a very obvious place in our home. And that can be very helpful, because the last thing you want to do is have people have to look for such an important document. I know this has been really fast, but hopefully is that what you wanted? Is that what you were hoping we could do? Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
I wish I could join you for the rest of it, but I've got to scoot away again. I'll get the report from Karl though. Aloha pa.
Aloha pa. Friends, I think that was the end of the presentation that we had prepared. So Shigoni is on.
Yeah, nice.
I wanted to invite Shigoni. She's been through like the burial process, but she's also has some experience about making burial kits within the community. So Shigoni, the floor is yours.
Hey, yeah, I was reading about the burial kits. It was where you choose your own, and I don't have my face on, guys. I'm sorry, I just rolled out of bed. You choose your fabric, you get your ring together, and so it's one less, and you get your rose oil and you have your prayers picked out and you put it in a box. And it's one less thing your family has to worry about, because I know there is some benefit to going like shopping as part of the process of being able to grieve, like gathering the things together. I guess it's not necessarily shopping, but gathering the things together. But for me, it was quite wonderful that the community of Matsu already had it to where I didn't have to worry about it. Like, where am I supposed to go get rose oil? Where am I supposed to go and do this? And so because it was together, it was one less thing that we had to worry about. And, wonderfully, my mother was involved with that. So nobody had to worry about it, because, maybe we're not in a place that, because on Sunday, I think, we're not in a place where we can get the cloth or the material, or we're not in a place that can get this. And how exactly are we supposed to do this? If you've ever had to go through it, you're like, what are the logistics involved? I mean, wrapping, how does that work with with this way and that way? So those things having been put together, was just one less worry that we had. And it was quite a wonderful gift for us to have. It had, in the box, it had the material, it had a ring, it had a prayer, and I believe, I want to say a CD, but because that was, we were able to ensure that we had appropriately had my mom's wishes granted. The other portion that I wanted to share is what's called your, and I don't think you covered that, or I'm not sure, I wasn't here for the beginning part. Your medical power of attorney. Did we cover that at all? Anybody? No. So this is important. Your medical power of attorney. What is it that you want to have done in this physical realm when we're talking about heroic efforts by the medical field for your life? And it is a form that's free to be filled out. And if you want to have nothing done, you have to legally document it in the state of Alaska, and you have to let everybody know. Now, legally document it means I'm going to write it out, I'm going to go to the notary, and I'm going to have them sign it. It has to be available for the paramedics who, if the paramedics arrive and see it, because they are legally obligated to provide life-saving efforts unless they see it. But also because of the state of Alaska, anybody can void it. So if somebody else is there and they say, no, you must perform heroic efforts. So your responsibility would be twofold. Please, grant my wishes and don't do this or don't do that. It can be something as simple as you can provide me supplemental oxygen, but please don't do CPR. You can provide me supplemental oxygen and you can intubate me. Like, for instance, if we have people with COVID, some people have been intubated with COVID and they recuperated. And so you can say, I would like this done, but not this. You can do this, but not this. And let all of your family know. And let it be, easily documented. I actually, for my mother-in-law, let the fire department of our neighborhood know. Because she has what's called a Comfort 1, and that's a document that has to be supported by your physician in that you have a terminal condition that life-saving efforts would not be, like your choice is not to engage in life-saving efforts. But if it's just, you're driving along and you get hit by a car, what are your choices there? What is your line there? What is it that you would like to not have done? I feel very grateful that during the time, although my mom's husband did call 911 and the paramedics did perform what would be considered life-saving efforts, I was grateful that she was already gone, because then we would not have to make the decision of her being in the ICU, in the hospital, the family gathering, and like doing what's called, quote unquote, pulling the plug. Filing paperwork is involved with pulling the plug. And so when I'm talking about the raw logistics of medical intervention, it's really important to have that decision made ahead of time and to let your family know. I knew from the get-go, because when I went to paramedic school, I asked everybody, and then when I went to PA school, I asked everybody again. So we all kind of knew where our line was. And my mom very openly was saying, don't do anything. Just let me, just please let me return to Baha'u'llah and just let me stay in the Abha kingdom. And so I was like, that was easy for us. We all knew what she wanted, but legally speaking, the person who would be making those decisions and who would have the right to make those decisions was her husband. So had she been intubated, had she gone to the ICU and had that question come up, he would be the one to say, and he is not a Baha'i. So that, if you file your legal paperwork and say, well, this is what she said, and this is what we have, legally there, she, her wishes would be honored because she filled it out. Right. He was kind enough. And I say that, not because he wouldn't, but because I've heard other terrible stories about family, like just losing their ability to be courteous during the time of death. And he did not have to consent to anything that my mom wanted, as far as being wanting a Baha'i burial and wanting it in the time frame and wanting this and wanting that. So he could have said, no, that's not what I want. I want her to be cremated. And we would have had no legal recourse because we had no legal paperwork. So it was simply, you know, for love of her and knowing that this is what she wanted. And because he wasn't familiar with the process, knowing to leave it up to us. And we of course reached out to the community, but he would be able to interfere only because he's the legal representative as her spouse. So if we want to have our wishes granted or our wishes honored, we have to document it and we have to think about it. Do we want this? Do we want that? And have it known. I think that Lee said it, you know, she said, it needs to be known. People need to know where it's at. And as we get older, it needs to be easier accessible. If we don't want anybody to do anything, I have the DNR. It's called do not resuscitate. And then the other obligation, the other option is do not intubate. So you can say, I don't want you to do CPR, or you can say, well, you can do CPR, but don't intubate me. And I have it right there on the door. You know, my mother-in-law is in an assisted living facility right now, and her Alzheimer's is deteriorating. And I knew before we came to this place that she would not want to be resuscitated. She would not want to have heroic efforts done. And so to spare the ambulance, the doctors, the family, I mean, the rest of the family of making that decision, you know, we filed it and it's there. So the decision has been made and nobody has to make that decision in duress. So those are the two things that I think would be essential when we talk about burial. Burial is a beautiful process, but as we are mucking around in the legalities of this state, in this world, there are some things that can make it less pleasant or less healing. And one would be hanging out in the ICU for weeks while people try to decide who has the right to make the decisions for you.
Thank you very much, Shigoni. And that comes from a nurse who's been working all night.
No, so, I'm a PA, but I've been working, all night in the ER.
Thank you so much. I know Kathy has a burial kit that she can actually describe some of the contents inside.
Okay, so this is what I've come up with. First of all, you put it in a box. It says Bahá'í Burial Kit. And all right, okay, and you keep it in a place that's known to you and others. And you also pack it. If you're going to move, you pack it. All right, so that's on the outside. On the inside, it's got a bag that's got all kinds of stuff. It's got a biohazard bag, which I think is important. 2 little towels to cover private areas, a burial ring, rose oil. It's got these bathing wipes that you can get right off of Amazon that makes the body. It's got instructions right on it because it's actually to prep for surgery, but it really helps a lot. A little pad to put under the body, because if you're doing this at home and your body has not been to a mortuary, when bodies die, they let go of everything. So this is actually a little pee pad for dogs, but it works. A ring and some rose oil. Okay. I find that the rose oil is a little easier to work with than the rose water. That rose water gets everywhere. This is a really good book that if anybody wants to get one, it's from a Baha'i lady whose daughter died. And so she has a website that has shrouds on it, but the book is the important part as far as I'm concerned. It's Pre-Planning Burial Guide and Baha'i Burial Information. So it's got some choices in the front that you can write for your own burial, what your choices are. But in the back, it's got pictures, okay? Number 1, how to turn a body. which gets important, how to wash, and then how to wrap. And she's got several different shrouding methods in here. The one that I particularly like, boy, like you can have a choice, is the 5-cloth method. And in this box, I also have all of the pieces of cloth that you need. Okay, so it's already set and ready to go. The other one is a plan to make coffins. So what David and I have been doing is making them out of birch plywood. It's not quite hardwood, but it's almost hardwood. And since it's not a law for the West yet, you just need 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, and they go together pretty quick. So that's kind of what, and of course, an inventory to make sure you got everything in your bulk. To be added, prayer book, paper towels, beautiful music, water or other beverage for participants. So that's what's in there. And so all of David's family has one of these, and we've got to use it a few times. And LSA of Fairbanks and Nenana and Goldstream all have a kit and ready to go. So if anybody wants to a full list of stuff, I can get that to you if you want.
Thank you. I see Gloria's hand went up.
Gloria, you're muted.
Kathy's very efficient and did a beautiful job. But there's one thing that that I have run into that has been very hard when you have to do large men. We don't always have the wherewith to pull the body, to turn it, to lift it. And I found out when I had surgery recently, they have some really cool disposable pads. They call them disposable, but they actually could be laundered and used again. They have a very heavy plastic bottom, and they have straps that you can actually move a 200-300 pound man and pull and get the body turned so that you can wrap it and lift it. And it would make it so much easier. So if maybe a community or someone else could have it, it's amazing when you're preparing a body and the weight is immobile, the strength that is needed. And it can even be a tiny mid-sized child, and it can still be difficult. So that's probably one of the greatest gifts I would ever have a community obtain.
Thank you. I think we had one more slide that kind of will summarize most of the things that we've covered. Let's see. I'll just go through them really quickly. This is a summary. It's forbidden to carry the body for more than 1 hour's journey from the place of death. It's forbidden to cremate the body. Body should be buried in a coffin made of crystal, stone, or hard fine wood. Body should be washed and wrapped in a shroud of silk and cotton. Bahá'í burial ring should be placed on one finger. Prayer for the dead should be said before interment, and everyone should have a will. Yeah. And that's all we had prepared for today. We do have 5 more minutes left. If anybody has any questions.
I just missed one of the slides at the very beginning. My phone rang and I had to take it. And I think it was right after I read mine. I can't remember, but I'm wondering if Karl can flip back through and find Let me see if I can see it here. Wasn't the introduction. Go down, go down. No. 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 Maybe transporting.
Is that the one?
No.
No. Preparation for burial.
I think the transporting, the longer one. Yeah. I can just read it while others talk.
Big Bud?
Well, I wonder if there was no mention of embalming, so I assume that can be gotten at a later time. Is there any place where we can get the printed part? Because I only understood about 10% of what was said.
We can send you this very PowerPoint that we used.
Also,
I think that would be very helpful.
Is there any chance that we could get an address or where we could get the burial kit?
I think burial kits can be purchased, but there's many communities I understand who have kind of made it even a possibility for a study circle to do an avenue of service, creating burial kits. It probably is way more cost effective and a little bit more personalized as well. It's not all that complex what's in the burial kit, and yet there are some like Simple Ideas, some other Baha'i institutions where you can order these things. But I know that there have been some efforts to pull together people and build burial kits.
Yeah, where would I go to get those addresses and information?
Does anybody have an easy answer for Bud?
I'm wondering if somehow the PowerPoint could be emailed to participants or even to all the local assemblies, and also the website that Kathy was referring to about My Final Wishes.
Well, our LSA is down to 5 people, and 2 of them are in virus right now. So we're basically inactive. So we're going to have to get something from a broader perspective than that.
I found a site that just sells a kit. The kits are a little bit pricey, but I think that looks like what needs to be in them. I also wonder, could Kathy, you gave such a great list, and it looks like stuff that you've assembled. Could you like send the list out? Could you just like, I love practical information by people who've done things. So if you could like just type those things out and send those things, I'm going to put in this website that I just Googled in here. But yeah.
Yeah, because overall, when I make these, I typically make 9, of course. But things don't come in 9s, so yeah, 10 is a better number. So and I think this go it was about $80 a box. So the ring is probably the most expensive one item that's expensive. I actually have an Amazon wish list that's called burial. Yeah, I think I don't know if I've got it with me because I'm in Arizona, a spreadsheet of where all this stuff came from. So let me dig around, and if somebody can give me their email addresses, I'll put my email address in the chat, and then you can write that down, and then we can go from there. Because the
And
chat.
what I will do with the PowerPoint, I'm going to give it to the National Baha'i Office. And if you are wanting it, you might just communicate directly with the National Baha'i Center. Karen Moore is probably the specific person who will respond. And my hope is that she will just be able to send it to you as an attachment.
Can I second that request that Kathy share that information and exactly what you just said happened, Karl? Because just when it happens, it's so stressful and it's such a like last minute thing. And I just to have somebody, you know, what Tahare said about washing a body on the dining room table, like that practical information needs to be shared, especially because so much of our beautiful community up here is rural. So as much as I love an Amazon wish list, share that too, Kathy.
You know, I also just got a message here from Gavin, who doesn't have a voice except through chat, but he says, everybody should be informed that rings are also available for sale from the the Alaska National Center. And so he's not able to chat with everybody, only to me. So that's communicated out. He's probably hearing me say this. So the rings are there at the national office.
I know Phil had something to say, and then Kay.
It's my understanding this is being recorded. How do we access this?
Probably also requested of the Baha'i National Center.
Thank you.
And they will give you a link to it.
Okay.
Just a practical measure, because Chuck was ill for so long, we knew that he would pass. And so we ordered a casket ahead of time. They kept it at the city shop for quite a while. He kept lingering. And interestingly, it was made by Trappist monks. We found it online. They lived in Iowa, but they had been to the shrine. They had lived in Israel and knew a little bit about the sacredness of it all. So it was a very special casket that was maybe a little more expensive than handmade, but it certainly met our needs.
I was being asked, how much does one of the rings cost? I'm seeing if I can get a response from Gavin if he knows.
I know I recently called.
$12. Gavin
Yeah.
thought they were $12.
Yeah, it's not very expensive.
Yeah. And one other comment I would just can share is I was some years ago asked to serve as the executor of a Baha'i who had passed without a will. And friends, it was just very complicated. Things have to go into probate. It takes years for it to get resolved because of the legal processes when it's not made clear where your estate goes. And the more heartbreaking thing about it was that in the end, in my heart, I don't believe that the believers' wishes were able to be represented because it was unclear. And so that's the saddest part. And then one other caveat about that is that every once in a while, local spiritual assemblies and national spiritual assemblies receive significant contributions from those who've passed in their estates. And it's a tremendous bounty to the institution to be able to do the work of the faith. And so, again, our wishes are only made clear if we make them clear. All right.
And Karl, my understanding is that if somebody does want to do a bequest to a national assembly or a local assembly, it really is helpful to those institutions to know in advance that those bequests have been made. And especially, for instance, if you leave some of your, I don't know, your IRAs or those types of funds to the National Assembly, really the National Assembly has to know, because otherwise they wouldn't know to contact the to get that bequest. So again, clear communication is really important.
Maybe would it be possible to end on a little note of humor? When we were serving in Haifa, we were able to attend the funeral of both Rahia Khanum and Dr. Arbab's wife. They were very simple and humble and respectful. But Chuck didn't have proper clothing to wear because we were just very casual most of the time. And Bonnie and Blaine Reed, I think it helped set up what they called like a thrift store, but it's an exchange where you just go and get things that people left as they were leaving to the Bahá'í World Center. So Chuck found a suit. It fit him perfectly. And in the waistband were written the words Nali Akshiavani. So Nali had left his suit there, and Chuck wore that to the funeral of Rahia Khanum. And then when it came time for Chuck's funeral, he wanted to be buried in. So if it matters what clothing we wear, he was wearing the suit of a former member of the House of Justice. Wow. He liked that.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. When I visited the burial spot of Shoghi Effendi, it was impressive, all the engraved writings from the faith, different writings. It was like walking in Wonderland. Just the size of it is really impressive. Another comment is, I was at the memorial for Jones Wangatilan in Nome, and it was a wonderful event. I won't go into details, but at the end, a young man said, "Wow, that was awesome." So it was an uplifting, unifying, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. It's a sad, trying time, but it's a wonderful. It can be wonderful.
Lois Morgan here. This is one of the upsides of COVID, is that we've begun to use Zoom, and I've loved every single story that you nice people have shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois, for joining us. All right, dear friends, thank you so much for your participation and interest today. There seems to be a desire to do something similar for the Will and Testament, so maybe something in the coming months will arise in the same spirit.
Thank you to everybody who prepared this presentation and who participated. It was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you very, very much.
Ditto to Tim's comment.
Aloha, dear ones.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Aloha. Thank you. Bye.